Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast, brought to you by Rocket Agency. I'm your host, James Lawrence.
Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast. I'm here today with Andy Scales. Andy, welcome back to the pod.
Thanks for having me back, James. Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised to get your call again a year after our last catch up. So obviously I didn't stuff up too much.
No, it was a great conversation, the first one. So I will reintroduce you just for the benefit of any listeners that didn't catch your first pod. So Andy is founder and director of Campaign Lab, regarded at the moment as one of the most innovative PR agencies in the country. 8 years into the journey, Campaign Lab has racked up more than 60 industry awards, has 3 times, I think, topped Provokes rankings as APAC's pound for pound most creative PR agency. Andy, you've landed and worked on accounts and been the PR agency of choice for clients like Fiji Airways, Decathlon, Oppo, Love Honey, Fujifilm, Crown Plaza, and Hertz. So Andy, when I thought just to catch up and talk about PR as we kind of near the beginning of 2025, I thought it'd be awesome to have you back on to the pod. So I'm just going to ask you a very broad question, which I think are sometimes the very difficult ones to answer. But what are the big trends that we're seeing in PR as we kind of end 2024?
Oh wow! So starting with the big questions there, Jim. I guess in terms of trends, look, first and foremost, it's harder than ever. I think is the honest answer. We've got a situation where there's fewer and fewer people in the newsrooms. We're seeing, redundancies being made at some of the big major networks. So it's harder than ever to land a story. And then at the same time, we've got comms that's getting faster and faster. So, everybody's trying to churn out stories. A lot of these media and journalists are being hit with, literally hundreds of pitches on a daily basis. So to stand out and secure editorial around coverage is really hard. So, look, I think in a number of ways, so that creates opportunities for PR agencies to be really, really creative in the thinking and lead on bigger, more creative campaigns.
And how does that, how much of PR these days is getting, articles in publications versus other activity that you're doing?
I think there's definitely a blurring of the lines. Look, we kind of position ourselves as an ad first agency. So yes, we do things across social media and influencers. We do creatives. We do some digital marketing as well. But every element, every idea that we put forward will always have an and first element to it. So we essentially use media or journalists as the barometer to test out whether an idea is good or not. And if you can get past a news editor, then it can be rolled out across multiple channels. So it's central to everything that we do, but it's not everything that we do, if that makes sense.
Yeah. But that's kind of the lead, because it is hard, right? Like you mentioned you're doing digital marketing. There's an overlap between Rocket and Campaign Lab, right? Like a very small overlap where you'd be doing some digital media type services for certain clients that love the work you do in that own space. So agencies are always going to have a little bit of an overlap, and they might a broad kind of cross section of where we work, but it's that earned bit, which I guess is the core that separate you from, say, Rocket, where we're purely digital. Is that kind of right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's about sort of thinking holistically about how do we go to market with a message. So, we may have a campaign idea or have an earned first element, and it will, it's going to drive press coverage, and then how can it be rolled out across other markets? So, a lot of the time we'll work with digital advertising agencies and alike. So, they'll manage that part of the program, we'll manage the PR, but the idea itself has been either developed by us or in collaboration. Yeah, we've had a seat at the table from the start. And I think that's the key part, because often, where it can go wrong is when, somebody comes to you and says, hey, can you PR this ad? And at that point, it's a little bit too late. Whereas, if you've got a seat at the table, then we can talk about how do we earn attention through this idea, through earned media, through editorial, and what kind of tweaks can we make to this campaign concept to ensure that it's got editorial value.
And so how does that work? You kind of mentioned, seat at the table, don't bring us into quote unquote PR at the back end. How does integration work? How does integration best work, I guess? If the audience of the pod are in-house marketers, and they may or may not have a PR agency, they may or may not have a digital agency, comms agency, they're doing certain things in-house. Like, how do you get the best outcome overall?
certainly being involved at the very beginning of the brief. So, if I was speaking to a CMO tomorrow and they're asking, what's the best way for them to put forward a brief, I think it would be about briefing the PR agency at the same time as you're briefing the creative agency, the media agency, etc. Maybe coming back with tissue ideas and then how can we all kind of work collaboratively together to generate the best results. So, look, to give you an example of what I mean, maybe one of our biggest campaigns over the past year was a campaign called Dirty Weekend Away. So the original brief came to us, and it was from Eufy Clean. We're about to launch a new vacuum cleaner into market, very, very premium vacuum cleaner, brand new brand under a brand called Mark. Can you help us out with some PR? So originally it was PR, product reviews, the press release, the maybe a media event. But we looked at that as an opportunity to do something much bigger. So we came up with the concept of launching Dirty Weekend Away, which was opportunity for consumers to stay in a $20 million mansion for free on one condition, and that they clean up on arrival. So we knew that the campaign was quirky enough that it was going to drive mass media pickup. It was going to get them into publications in travel sections and luxury mags and areas where, quite frankly, a vacuum cleaner doesn't deserve to be. So, that had that PR element. But thinking about it from a integrated approach, it was like, okay, what's the goal that we're trying to achieve here? So for us, it was about new brand. How do we build up signups and on their website and those kind of things? So working really closely with their digital marketing team to facilitate that. So you'd go to the website. If there was no bookings available, you'd go on a wait list, and that was capturing data. And then using that data, then the digital marketing were then sort of able to create first party data for retargeting campaigns, et cetera, et cetera. So we weren't directly doing the digital advertising element of it, but we were working in sync with the team doing that. And just, I think, having that understanding of how the broader picture or broader plan rolls out is important.
I'm always impressed from your agency, and I think PR agencies in general, the way that you guys think. I always feel that the way that when you speak to someone who's really, really good at PR, this kind of ideation and ability to kind of take something that is kind of here and move it kind of across to here as being of interest to the market. Like, how do you internally in the agency, how do you go about that kind of ideation? Like, how do you come up with Dirty Weekend Away, which I thought might have been from one of your different clients when you first mentioned it. Given that Campaign Lab do work with Love Honey, but I'm glad it was a vacuum cleaner brand. Keep it PG for the listeners to the pod. But like what does it look like? I'd love to just kind of inside Campaign Lab. Like, how did your team come up with ideas that taken from being, he's a prize versus he's something that's actually going to get traction?
Yeah, so I think there's probably two aspects to it: structured and unstructured. So the structured stuff would be things like desk research. So like our whole ethos is about joining the conversation. So we know that people don't really care about vacuum cleaners, and most of the time those launches suck. Forgive the pun.
I've been preparing that all week, eh?
Yeah, indeed. So what are the conversations that target market are having at the time? So we knew we're coming into peak travel period. There was lots of conversations about getaways and Euro adventures and that kind of stuff. So they were just some of the conversations. So a bit of desk research from the structured side. Then we do ideation sessions, and there's a number of different techniques that we use, different brainstorming techniques, breaking into teams and individuals to ideate stuff like, so then there's that component of it. And then there's the unstructured. And honestly, I think like some of our biggest and best ideas have been from when people have just kind of gone out for a walk, or, they're having to think about something in the shower or getting ready in the morning, those kind of things. And often it can just spark a thought or an idea, that we share around. And then you build it out from there. And so, even within the agency as well, we've got like open lines of communications, which are literally like ideas bins on messaging, group chats and things like that, where everyone's just firing in, throwing in ideas. We're also looking at what other brands have done and looking for inspiration, because believe me, there's truly no such thing as an original idea. It's all kind of influenced by things around you. So yeah, we do a lot of that, and then we build it out from there.
How do you I think for listeners who are primarily in-house marketers engaging agencies or doing things in-house. Like, how do you, as a business owner, price that? Like, how do you, because creativity is such a difficult, it's so intangible, right? I'm sure like you've had ideas that just like land in the first 30 minutes of a brainstorm, or someone comes in after one night of having a think and got it. And then other things just won't land, right? Like, how do you actually kind of resource it and kind of put guardrails around it that work commercially for agency and client?
Yeah, it's a great question, and look, I actually think that it's one of the things for CMOs, any CMOs that are listening. I would really encourage them to put a line item in any kind of scope of work for ideation. Ask the agency to come back, whether it's sort of once a quarter, twice a quarter, however much you want, with fresh ideas, creative thinking, big ideas as well. It's always easier to scale an idea right back to get within budget than
Mm.
it try and polish a turd or build up a crappy idea. So I think it's the most valuable set that we've got as an agency is those ideas. And so, I'd encourage people to include that as some kind of line item or part of the ongoing process.
It's really interesting. So in terms of getting, I do want to unpack other areas of PR through the chat, but in terms of, if we go back to journos, newsrooms, inundated, flooded, less resourcing, how do you make things stand out? How do you make it easier to get picked up? Like, what are those, I guess, hallmarks of interesting ideas or interesting articles?
I think our job is really about packaging up stories and making it presenting them in the most user-friendly way for a journalist. Ultimately, you want them to be able to take a story and make it very, very easy for them to run it. So when you're pulling together a pitch, you're thinking about what's the vision? Do I need video backing it up? Do I need a talking head from a CEO? Do I need B-roll, case studies? If you're pitching for television, you need all of those elements. Still photography, graphics, all of those kind of things that might aid a story. Case studies, do we have a consumer real life case study that we can draw on for quotes? On the point of quotes, unique quotes for different media outlets as well, because they don't want to all run the same comments and commentary. So packaging up the story is super important. And then really sort of identifying who do you really think is going to run it? And often you sort of see perhaps some of the less experienced agencies or PR pros out there that might kind of fire out to a much broader media landscape, whereas we'd take a much more sniper-like approach in terms of targeting media that we feel this is going to really resonate with. And from there, you generate results, and the more stories you get, and the more those journalists are likely to come back to you for other opportunities in the future.
Just make it easy and relevant, and
It's really not rocket science, and I think that's the thing about PR. But often it's very easy to try and cut corners, and really, if you want to drive coverage, then you want to be making sure that you've got the package for them for those media.
yeah. So it feels to me that the actual getting picked up is not the hard bit, but it's coming up with the interesting story and the angle and all the assets in the first instance, right?
It's still pretty hard, but
Not the harder bit. Like, I think I don't know, my feeling is that it's the perspective and the angle that you guys bring. It's like the really versus the email address of a journalist, right? Like, I think that's how you
yeah,
package it up.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, anybody can subscribe to software and get media, email addresses and pitch in a story, but it's about identifying those angles and doing things that are generally going to get people talking about the brand, the product, the story, whatever it is you're pitching. If you think again, sort of back to the Dirty Weekend Away concept, it was that kind of that moment. It's like, you can stay in this villa, this $20 million villa in Tamarama for free, but you've got a vacuum when you arrive. So we had really amazing visuals with it. We had this $20 million mansion with like shit everywhere that you had to vacuum up. And it just kind of sparked an interest among people. So what it also enabled them to do as well was to get outside of their traditional media. So yes, we could have fired out a press release about a new vacuum being launched and probably had some pickup across the tech titles, but this was on the project, this Daily Telegraph, news.com.au. This was in places where you wouldn't expect to see a story about a vacuum cleaner, but it that was the audience that they wanted to go after and reach mainstream media with it.
And I presume that then the idea could live on, right? Where you actually would have then had footage of the cleanup, being able to then pump that out through social and
Absolutely, yeah. So then, so we used that property as the launch venue for the products. We had a launch event as well. So tech media and consumer media came down, and some influencers unveiled the products, and then after it went live, we then did a bunch of media and influencer from Mills. So it was like the ultimate kind of product test. So we invite them down, we'd book them in for one night. They'd get to experience this amazing property and try out the vacuum cleaner, and then base their reviews and write their reviews off the back of that. So yeah, we had influencers stay there. We ran competitions for consumers that were unable to get a booking. They could win a night there, and it went on and on and on. And the campaign was a huge success.
it's really cool. What about in a B2B context? Like what similar principles apply? And how do things kind of differ when you're trying to market a product that is to be marketed to a business sector?
Yeah, B2B is an interesting space because I think that a lot of for one reason or another, a lot of B2B brands can get stuck in a rut of doing the same as everyone else in terms of their approach. They might do a bit of content marketing. They might do, some digital advertising, some trade release. And they can get very serious with their marketing strategies where I kind of feel like regardless whether it's B2B or B2C, you're still talking about humans and human interaction. So I think that, there's an opportunity to have some fun with what they're doing and be a bit more playful perhaps. And, think a little bit more creatively.
Definitely feels that's a trend in B2B marketing is you kind of touched on it, the whole B to H thing. And there's definitely some differences, but bringing personality, bringing humor, bringing kind of tone of voice that is far less formal seems to be the trend of a lot of the B2B marketing that's kind of taking place these days.
I'll take you back maybe like 12, 14 years, but one of the best campaigns that I ever ran was for a construction hire company in the UK called Dumpers for Goalposts. And it was a soccer related campaign to tie in with the World Cup, Soccer World Cup that was taking place at the time. And again, it was about joining the conversations. They knew that the construction workers on site weren't talking about, backhoe loaders and skid steer dumpers. They were talking about the World Cup. So we ran this whole content marketing campaign where we had information hub on soccer, but we also had like dumpers that were painted in national colors and all that kind of stuff that you could hire. So just kind of thinking a little bit differently, being a bit more kind of broader with the messaging, I think is an opportunity for B2B customers.
Yeah, nice one. In terms of AI, how are we've done kind of a lot of pods, probably more from the digital marketing kind of viewpoint as to what we're seeing the impact of AI. Like what are you seeing within the PR industry, how AI is changing things or not changing things? And then without trying to get too far into the future, like what do you see as the kind of core themes or trends there?
Yeah, AI is very useful. I mean, we use it and have been using it for a long time, whether it's Gemini, ChatGPT, some of the other tools as well. I kind of describe it as being like a really fucking good account exec, in that a first draft of things or some background and notes and things like that. It's very useful. It still needs a lot of human input. From what we see, from a and media or editorial perspective, it's quite an interesting space. I think there's a a lot of concern around, will AI take journalist jobs and those kind of things. We're also seeing some of the tech media, for example, now putting badges up on their sites to kind of say that it's not AI generated content. I think it's, from what we do is very useful, and I think it's only going to get stronger. Um, what I'd like to see it doing more of is taking away some of the admin time involved in PR, the reporting and those kind of things, and maybe sort of leveraging it more in that way.
Yeah, fair enough. Um, Putting with media relations, getting stories and articles published and whatever else, what are the other big areas of PR at the moment? Like, I presume last time we chatted, we talked quite a lot around I guess, the intersection of both of our areas where digital and PR kind of coming together. Talked about digital PR as kind of um, our industry being the digital marketing industry, seeing kind of digital PR as being a really effective way of generating offsite interest in a brand for SEO purposes.
Yep.
What are you seeing out there?
I think probably one of the areas that we're seeing a lot of opportunity in is probably around affiliate PR. We're seeing a lot of that across media outlets. If you have a look at news.com.au or any of the kind of the shopping listicles, they'll all say a number of these articles, products mentioned in this article include affiliate links. So that is getting bigger than ever, and we think that's going to be a trend that continues and something that we're,
Wh-
we're
And what is that? Is that kind of outbrain into Bulla, or that's separate to that?
It's essentially like using affiliate links for any of those publishers. So there'll be any of the product mentions, they'll have an affiliate link associated with that. So we, from a PR side, we still be pitching those stories, but if we're pitching those stories knowing that there are affiliate codes around those products for those publishers, then obviously it stands much more chance of getting picked up.
So you're writing an article. Sorry, let's not use the vacuum cleaner example because it's an actual client, but let's you're putting an article together about a new TV, and then at the bottom of that article, links to buy that TV will appear on the page, and the publisher of that article would get a percentage of the purchase.
Correct. Yeah. So probably the best examples, if you look at things like Black Friday gift guides or Christmas gift guides, and that we've compiled the list of the top presents for Father's Day, those kind of things. So a lot of those will have affiliate links behind them. So the publishers will be taking a commission if somebody though then goes on to purchase that product. So I think that's probably a really kind of interesting example of where the lines are kind of getting blurred between PR and digital marketing. So, and at the same time, we're seeing that a number of these publishers, are cutting staff. They're having to make cuts. They're looking for new revenue models and ways to make money. So, you can understand it.
And do they have a duty to kind of disclose when they're getting making a commission?
Yeah. So all of those articles will include a disclaimer at the top to say that they may receive affiliate payments. So not every single link will have an affiliate link, but some of them certainly will. And so, that's certainly an interesting space.
Yeah, interesting. And then what are you seeing in terms of digital PR as it relates to kind of generating links for clients? I think it's something that your English, the digital PR industry, I think has kind of strong links as bad as you was talking about something sucking talk in relation to a vacuum cleaner. But the digital PR industry does have strong links to the UK. Are you seeing people reach out to you and kind of when you're getting articles published online, is the knock-on effect or the benefit of generating links something that your clients are kind of caring about or asking about? Or
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So from an SEO perspective, it's super important. I'd say all of our clients care about that. So backlinks are super important. We're obviously from a PR agency side of things, we push for inclusion. It's not a given. These are earned media articles, so we'll always be looking for them to be included. But there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. So a lot of the time, that does come down to relationships and have you packaged something up for a certain journalist or offered or gone over and above to help them with a story, and then they're more inclined to include it. We're also more inclined to include the link if it adds value to the reader as well. So, are they going to go to through this link and discover or learn something more? Is it going to be a further assistance to them?
yeah, nice.
So thinking about what is on the other side of that link, I think is super important.
Yeah, nice. And then in terms of social media, what makes, how do you put together a package where, like, presuming the idea comes first and then looking at where it, is best suited to play out would make sense. But what kind of role of social?
Social, massive role. So always looking at influencer partnerships, organic social, and then how do we work with some of those influencers to then drive PR coverage? So, you'll often see news articles commenting on the latest TikTok trend and those kind of things. So, we'll take influencer content that's been published and then repitch that back into the media about, whatever the story might be, and link through to that particular social post. So, another example I can give you is probably a campaign that we did recently for thrifty car rental. So, that had big social, a big integrated element to it as well. So, from a PR side of things, we know that it's pretty difficult to keep trying to pitch in stories about car hire. There's not too many publications that
Yeah.
cover stories about car hire. So the idea came about around the experiences that customers have and families have when hiring cars and going on road trips, and we identified the road trip tantrums that kids have on a road trip. So we did a partnership for Thrifty with the Wiggles and launched a campaign called Backseat Bandmates. And it was basically an interactive kids booklet where it had music through the Bluetooth, some puzzles, games, some coloring and stuff. And we made it free for customers. Anyone that hired a Thrifty car could would get access to one of these packs. So that again, it enabled us to drive mass media coverage for the brand across Australia and New Zealand. We use consumer research to help delve in and discover some of those news angles. So we quantified, for example, the number of times that kids ask, "Are we there yet?" on a road trip. So everyone can relate to it. Anyone that's been in a car with kids, doesn't matter if it's your own kids, your friends' kids, would know that question comes up a lot, and it actually comes up 8.4 times per road trip. I can tell you that now. And so, launching these kits, but then there was a big influencer and social element to it as well. So, we'd make the vehicles available to influencers to go on a weekend road trip and to road test these booklets with their kids. Would then capture that content and then use it across our own channels and use it also to pitch back into media to drive further coverage.
It's an awesome campaign. How do you go about identifying a good influencer, and then how do you go about working with them to kind of maximize success for your client?
Software is the short answer to that. So a bit like any of the tools that you'll use, from a digital advertising perspective, we're using them for influencers as well. So, we can quickly look at a social media influencer and look at not just their reach, but what's their true reach in terms of how many accounts are they actually reaching, in which markets. We can look at past brand collaborations with them. So see, have they worked with all my competitors or is this, or are they working with complementary brands? Engagement rates, obviously. And also look at things like the language they use. Like, are they using a lot of profanity on their channel, and therefore does it really resonate with our brand? And then from that, we come back, we have some scoring, and we come back in and say, whether we think this person would be a good fit or a bad fit, as well as potential costs as well, which are getting crazy, by the way.
Yeah, right. And so that's a thing. Like CPCs are going up in digital media, cost of influence is going up as well.
Yeah, massively. And I think it's still, social media influencers aren't new, and the market is quite mature. But in the great scheme of things, it's still a little bit like the Wild West out there in terms of some of the rates that are being bandied around. It's kind of scary.
Interesting. And then any tips because you do hear nightmare stories, right, about influencers kind of not fulfilling kind of their obligation or just not being particularly good to work with? Like, any tips on the best way to manage influencers once you identify one you want to work with?
I think briefings are super important. It sounds obvious, but making sure that you're having clear briefings with them around so that everyone knows what the expectation is and that both parties feel comfortable with it. Often I think where it can sometimes fall down is where an influencer is creating content that they know is gonna work on their platform. These guys have perfected the art of creating content on their platform that resonates with their audience. So often, the challenge that we see is when an influencer is perhaps working with a brand that's slightly different to them in terms of tone and messaging. It's kind of like square peg, round hole, that kind of scenario whereby, the brand wants something portrayed a certain way, but the influencer is not going to do that. And then of course the content comes back and it's different to how the brand envisaged it. So I think briefings on both part are really, really important. Then of course, contracts.
Yeah.
And, making sure that those deliverables and everything are captured clearly in contract agreements.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting just around the, because we probably another area where we have a little bit of overlap is in influencers in our paid social media team. And that's something which we're trying to work with clients on as well, very much around if you want to go down the influencer path, you need to understand that they have an audience that trusts them, that like them, that have, over months and years have built up a relationship with that influencer, and that influencer is authentic, and you need to kind of allow that person to kind of to move in that direction. Like it must be such a challenge for businesses where back in the day you kind of controlled the narrative. You could through your paid advertising, TV, radio, and now you look at social media and it's also fragmented. Like, is that authenticity thing? Like, how are you seeing brands dealing with that?
Consumers can be incredibly skeptical, I think, of brands that are trying to, um, I don't know, maybe just force a message. Media as well. Media. If you think consumers are skeptical about a campaign, then you should go speak to a few journalists because once you hear back from them, they're the most skeptical. The no bullshit kind of media types. Um, I think though that authenticity piece is crucial, not just with the influencers that you're working with, but also just in terms of the campaigns that you're doing. Like, what's the relevance back to me as a brand, and having relevance and authenticity around it is key. Give you another example of one we did recently. Obviously, hot topics, the Olympics. We worked with Decathlon on a campaign called Playgrounds to Podiums. So even just in the name and everything, and the type of brand that Decathlon is, you can tell that it's going to be truly authentic. And it was all about how do we help um, engage younger kids into playing more and more sport, especially in a world where everyone's kind of playing computer games or on social media and those kind of things. And how do you get them participating in more sport and getting them out there? So yeah, Playgrounds to Podiums was a campaign that we ran with them. There wasn't an influencer element to it, but essentially it was that any schools could submit their school. Sorry, anybody could submit their school or their school children to receive part of a grant that they were running throughout the country. Again, we had sort of consumer research stuff that was designed to showcase just how few sports Aussie kids are playing at the moment, and then where we could go potentially in the future if they were to pay more. So that was an interesting way of tapping into the Olympics fever at times. We knew it was going to drive press coverage. It was joining the conversation around the Olympics. We then had big integrated efforts. So we worked really closely with their in-house team around all of the digital marketing side of things. So they had EDMs, they had in-store posters and displays going on. They, whole wealth of work going on by their team, who are awesome, by the way. And also influencers and social media side of things, but truly authentic content that resonates with them. We'd have expert commentary from their team that were in store at the time and things like that, talking about different sports and how kids can get involved because it was more authentic. And I think that's important.
Yeah, nice one. And then I guess in terms of measurement, like what kind of metrics do you encourage your clients to look at to kind of judge the efficacy of your work?
I think that's something that has to be agreed with them, to be honest. So, okay. So the other day, literally the other day, I was looking at, we use different, I won't name a name, but we use media monitoring software, and none of them are great, if I'm honest. They all miss coverage. There's some of the numbers are just kind of wild. This campaign report shows something like during a month, earned media reach of like 1.1 billion. And I nearly fell off my fucking chair. Like, this is ridiculous. The number that was being
Sounds like you guys have done a great job.
Yeah, that's what we use anyway. So, and I think that, these kind of vanity metrics, if you're using those kind of vanity metrics, then you're going to have problems. What we would prefer to do and what we do with most of our clients is really talk about what's the overall goal here. Is it about, sign-ups to a form, like the goal of PR, I mean. So is it, to try and get registrations for this form or something like that? Or is it about driving sales, or is it about changing sentiment of a brand because, we've been bashed over the head too much for the past couple of years and our brand reputation's taken a hit? What's the thing that we're trying to achieve? Measure it at the start and measure it at the end. And I think that's probably the clearest way that you can do it and whether you can measure success.
Yeah, fair enough. So very custom, depending on what you're being engaged to do.
Well, I think so. Otherwise, if you use the kind of like off the shelf metrics and you're just purely basing success on how many number of articles did I get and what was the reach of that, then you're going to run into problems because there's so many different, this is earned media. So there's so many influencing factors to whether a story runs and how many pieces it gets. And, if you're not looking at sentiment around it and things like that, or understanding the environment in which you're operating at that given time, then, the numbers being displayed could mean anything. I'm just not sure what value people tend to take away from those metrics.
Yeah.
Understand you've got to measure something, but I think it's a case of going, okay, what was the objective of what we're trying to do from a PR perspective, and then what measurements can we put in place?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the same for you, right? From a digital advertising perspective. So, if you were showing cost per view of everything and, the cost per view wasn't very good, but, well, that wasn't the objective campaign. It was about link clicks. Then, it's a very different number. And so understanding what the objective of those campaigns were at the start before executing and measuring them is critical.
Yep. Common sense. I agree. Just general advice now. So I think, as we've touched on a few times, listeners to the pod, generally in-house marketers. So I guess if you're thinking of engaging an agency similar to, or a function similar to Campaign Lab, what would be your advice for running PR and getting the most out of it in your business?
Firstly, I think it's important to get the brief right from the start. I've seen it before, fortunately not with the clients that we work with, but I've seen it before where, you get a half page brief and then they're expecting, you to go take that away and do something with it. I think that a really clear brief, it will deliver the best results. So I think that's really important, is that briefing stage. Also being realistic around the expectations, I think, and understanding that, being realistic around some of the outcomes and not expecting like an immediate impact. I think that PR is about momentum, and it's about building up that momentum in the media. And you'll see, from that, other opportunities, interview opportunities, coverage opportunities come along. I think also being responsive as well. So a PR team will be pitching the life out of a story. So then, if that team then uncovers an opportunity for interviewers, about making yourself ready and available and doing it at any given time.
Yeah, that's really good advice, I think, in terms of a marketer looking at PR. I guess conversely, like the mistakes or the pitfalls, the things to avoid? Like you've been doing this for a long time now. Like what are those things that you just go, no?
Yeah, I think probably assuming that people care about your business, because honestly, most of the time that they don't. But if you start from a position of nobody gives a shit about my brand, and then build from there, then you're probably in a really good place. So from there, you can decide, who do we want to go after? What conversations are they currently having in the market? How do we join and be a part of those conversations, and then build out marketing plans and strategies off the back of that?
And it does make sense, because it feels, from how you kicked the session off today, with it's just getting harder, right? Like it's harder for us to get things published. Journos are in environments where their jobs are being made tougher. They're probably having to do more in their day. You've kind of referenced them not being jaded, but being pretty, I guess, cynical or skeptical of the stories being put forward to them.
Yeah.
I guess if you take your brand away from it and just go, how do I actually put something forward that's going to make the publisher's readers actually engaged?
What exciting opportunity as well, because it kind of gives us, from an earned media perspective, to think really, really creatively and come up with something, a campaign, a story, an initiative that people really care about and are going to engage with. And that for me is pretty exciting.
Must go down with like a lead balloon when you kick that off with your new client. So like the perspective we're going to bring to this engagement is that no one gives a crap about your business.
It's true, right? And I think that, sometimes a lot of businesses can get, they're probably guilty of drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit. It can happen. So that's the importance of having agency partners, because we can bring that kind of honest, fair, and neutral perspective to things as well. And then talk about the things that perhaps consumers do care about. And some of those bits might be parts of the business and brand. I'm sure there are.
Love it, mate. Thanks so much for coming back onto the pod. We finish every episode with the same question. So I'm going to ask it of you, Andy. What's the best piece of career advice that you'd give to a marketer?
Okay. My best piece of career advice would be what my old boss once said to me once, which was, if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it. So always have a plan where you're trying to go and what you're trying to achieve with any kind of marketing plan.
Love it. That's a great one. Never heard that before.
That's my last one.
We'll have to check it. Andy Kales, thanks for coming back on the pod.
Thanks, James.